All right. Welcome, everyone, to our AI Jam series, a show where we bring you experts and insights on how to make AI a functional reality in your organization by transforming the hype into technical and business value. We are lucky today to have our guests with us, Jimmy, Derek, and Alejandro. For all of you who are new to our AI Jam series, don't forget that there's a chat and a Q&A up on the top of the screen so you can interact with us during this show. My name is Audrey Scribner, and I have my co-host Anthony Delicali with me. And this show is months in the making. We tried to do this show like 6 months ago, and the world has really changed now. So our topic of developing and deploying AI in the enterprise is really fresh and hot off the press.
We should have done this 6 months ago, recorded it, and then seen the comparison in terms of how the tooling and use cases have changed in 6 months. That would have been fun, Audrey.
I know. I think we'll use the word agentic about 15 times more now than we would have in the past. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to introduce our guests today. So Jimmy Whitaker, he's a chief scientist of AI Private Cloud at HPE, a machine learning engineer and strategist who leads the development of a Kubernetes-based inference platform for generative AI workloads. He holds a master's in computer science from University of Oxford with distinction. Derek Bekebrede, a technical product manager for AI infrastructure and applications. He developed roadmaps to help scale AI platforms for Amazon Alexa and Cruise AV, and spearheaded HPE AI Solutions Gen AI software stack launch. He has a background in research and data science and holds a master's in business from Chicago Booth. Alejandro Morales Martinez, an experienced engineer who applies machine learning methods to complex problems. He focuses graduate work on developing and implementing applied deep learning techniques for clinical applications in the field of medical imaging and holds a PhD in bioengineering from UC Berkeley. So we have quite a distinguished group here. Jimmy, I want to turn it over to you to introduce a little bit about your role, what you're building these days, and what you mean by advocate.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, thank you, Audrey. This is exciting to actually get to talk about all these things. And yeah, like you said, it's been a long time coming. Um, so today we're mainly working and focusing on our PCAI platform. And so basically that's our private cloud AI, both hardware, software, and like tooling stack to help developers and practitioners actually build their AI applications and run them in production, and not just in a cloud environment, but in an on-prem environment, which is becoming more and more popular these days as people are obviously concerned about data security and all kinds of other things that come in there. Um, so we've been focusing pretty heavily on developing this out, this PCAI platform, and one of the areas I've been particularly focused on, both in the past and to now, is the inference side. So deploying large language models at scale, looking at how we create these pipelines, whether they're RAG pipelines or whatever else, to make sure that we can apply the newest techniques in this environment. And yeah, as far as developer advocate, I really just I like working with customers. I like solving problems at the end of the day. So my main interest is how are we helping you solve your problems with the tools that we have, and with the best things that are out there, whether that's open source, whether that's custom built by us, or some combination of the two. So I just enjoy solving problems and want to see them solved the right way.
Thank you for the intro. Welcome. And Derek, how about yourself? So, what are you working on these days? And tell us what you're so enthusiastic about.
Yeah. So gosh, it changes so quickly what we're working on in the AI space. But these days for HPE, I'm the product manager leading our generative AI kind of use cases and software tools that we sell within the broader private cloud AI stack that HPE sells, which is an integrated hardware, software AI product. And so, of course, I come from the software side. I really enjoy thinking through what the use cases and workflows are for AI application developers, machine learning engineers, and data scientists, and finding ways to make it easier, more cost-effective, more productive, like for them to iterate and build like these really cool generative AI tools we're seeing across the space now. So that's what I think about my day to day is what's coming next. How can we make it kind of easy and accessible for enterprises to access? And yeah, it's just I've learned more, I think, in the last 2 years, seeing the pace of innovation in this space than I did in the decade before that. And it's just been a really exciting time I feel lucky to work in this space, maybe is what I'll say.
Yeah, it is. It's moving. It's moving so fast. It kind of puts you back into that lens of calling yourself a continuous learner. And if you were before, I feel like it has a new meaning now.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much and welcome. And Alejandro, over to you. What are you working on these days? And what are you tinkering with, I guess, would be a good question.
Yeah, so I get the chance to work closely with the customers as well as Jimmy and Derek. So I am really fortunate to be close to, real world use cases and applications of these technologies, which I always find fascinating. And for me, I also get the opportunity to build that technical content and demos, some of which we'll even showcase today. So it's really fun because I'm an engineer by training. So to be constantly exploring the latest frameworks, there's one every other week, it seems. It's really exciting, and we have some cool technologies that allow us to like be our own model providers and really just try out what latest open source models and things like that. So yeah, that's most of what I'm doing lately.
Yeah, Audrey, let's really keen on the tinkering piece over the next hour. I love that. I think we're just so early on, right, Alejandro? And as we reimagine all business process re-engineered, like if people are not tinkering with this stuff and trying to figure out how to best optimize for it, I don't think they're really learning. So I love the tinkering piece. So I want to circle back on that.
Yeah, and I'll say too, technology is more accessible than ever these days. The bar of entry has been reduced. You don't need a PhD or even a master's. If you're curious and driven, you can get a lot done these days.
Mhm. So with that, let's jump into our conversation here. So when we're considering developing and deploying scenarios, it really just helps us to level set and ask ourselves, well, what are we building? And how are we going to get it out into the world? And one thing on what kind of, let's say, AI approach or use case are we building? I saw this quote from McKinsey and Company. This was 2024. I feel like you have to date everything now, and knowing the month helps too. But they said that in the next 3 years, anything that's not connected to AI will be considered obsolete or ineffective. And so sometimes with these new technologies, we think, oh, well, it's going to be something like a new use case or something we've never done before. But when you hear a stat like that, you think, oh, no, we're not just making new things, we're remaking what we already do today.
Mhm.
So with that, so what will AI do? What are you guys seeing with these types of use cases and how customers are approaching them? And we're going to get a poll from the audience here. So you should see this pop up on your screen to hear where you're all at as well.
Yeah, so I'll give everyone a chance to start voting before we start biasing their answers.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah, spoken like
yeah.
a true engineer.
Yeah. But I think I will start more generically and maybe just say, I think the shift I've seen, and then we'll get more specific after this, is if you look back, I've been working in data science for the past decade. And if you look back even to 2020, 2021, machine learning was definitely utilized by a lot of enterprises, but it was seen as a niche. You had kind of silos working on it, and it was a specific product. It wasn't a foundation for other products. And I think with the launch of ChatGPT in late 2022, that's when we really started seeing everyone, like a lot of companies asking themselves, should this be part of every business practice that I have? Is this more than just kind of a silo or a niche that I have? And that's when we started seeing, I think, the pressure to really deliver AI in a lot of different use cases that we see here. And at least for myself, I think, we saw, if you look back at what enterprises did, we saw a lot of enterprises immediately try to jump towards these like chatbot, customer service, like answer questions with knowledge in 2023. And you saw maybe a few embarrassing like implications of AI. I don't know if others have examples they want to share, but I won't name companies, but you had chatbots kind of promising customers refunds that like they weren't authorized to give, kind of like selling cars that really weren't meant to be sold, et cetera. And so that was interesting to see. And I think businesses have pulled back now, and we're trying to think through, okay, what can AI actually do in a more strategic sense, as opposed to like I apply it everywhere first. And so Jimmy, Alejandro, I don't know what's your opinion on how you've seen it evolve?
Yeah, so it's moving fast, and the evolution is not like, I guess, classical evolution, which takes millions and millions of years, like we've talked about. It's like months and weeks even. But yeah, I do see it becoming like, I mean, I use it every day for a lot of different things, and it's almost a development partner a little bit. I will say it's turned me maybe a little bit more from a writer into an editor, but having knowledge and knowing the limitations of AI is like almost crucial to using it in a lot of these scenarios. I would say that there's that trust boundary of like what it's capable of slash what you want it to be capable of is still yeah, kind of a hard I don't know, rope to walk a little bit. But
We're dating, Jimmy. I think we're in the getting to know each other phase, right?
yes, exactly. And so no, but it's really powerful. Like everything from like coding assistants are obviously one of the areas that's just gangbusters right now, to yeah, the chatbot assistants and everything else. And yeah, connecting it to your data and yeah, it's moving really quickly. I think early on people found that with like the ChatGPT or the general LLMs, they had some level of capability, kind of roughly the knowledge of the internet up to a certain point. But anything real time, anything like, use case specific or private data specific, it people started trying to apply it to those scenarios, which I think is what you were hitting on, Derek, but then realizing some of the limitations and capabilities, seeing the potential of it for a lot of automation and those types of things, but still trying to figure out how to apply it effectively and even cost effectively, because these models are very power hungry beasts. And so, yeah, it's evolving fast. Like the agent, like workflows that are coming up and everything else, which is just layers of abstraction on top of the LLMs, using them as a brain is really compelling, but doing it right is really, really difficult without like huge adverse outcomes. And so that's not really how I'm seeing it evolve, but rather it's moving very quickly. It's very capable, but there's a lot of risks involved as well.
So we have our poll responses here. So what's interesting is that evolving ML workflows is really low compared to all the other results here. So we do have a question in the chat that says, where in this slide will enhanced data analysis be included? Does anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I would expect that that's probably almost in the LLMs for, I probably wouldn't say it's exactly knowledge work, but I think we're seeing those kind of coding assistants or like helping me with data analysis starting to happen. I won't go too deep, but like just some of the MCP things and model context protocol and some of the other context providers to LLMs and agents are becoming more and more powerful. So I think we're already starting to see that, but yeah, through the coding assistants and those types of things.
Yeah, definitely. I think what we'll see, at least for the near term, is, and this is maybe getting back to some of those embarrassing applications I talk about in 2023, we're going to have a human in the loop, I think, for a little bit more time. Like it's evolving rapidly, but I think we see that with the poll here, like we could automate business processes, but I bet we're still taking a sample of those in a lot of companies and seeing, is this output what I expected? Knowledge work, I think, is huge, or just learning. It's a huge educational tool, really, and I think that's where we're seeing like the biggest I guess results so far, biggest impact is in anyone can become an expert. It's better than YouTube at teaching you things that people have been trying to self-learn with YouTube in the past. Like try to chat with GPT or Gemini or Llama, etc., and it could teach you a lot. The only thing I mentioned this somewhat jokingly, but I know Jimmy and I talked about this maybe a month ago. One of the first use cases I used LLMs for was to start writing emails to my HOA. I could rant to the LLM, and it could turn that into a polite email. I didn't have to go through that process. Not a business use case, but I recommend it if anyone else has an HOA.
It helps you with tone, right?
Totally,
I
it's
think
great.
to Derek's point earlier about data science historically being a niche part of most enterprises, I'm not surprised seeing this results so evolving ML workflows. In my experience, it's been the same. Like the established data science workflows or data analytic workflows have largely remained untouched in my experience. It's just all of these other kind of opportunities that weren't possible to analyze before. Like, for example, things like, to me, low-hanging fruit is any type of technical documentation or onboarding process that's common across any number of teams, whether you're finance, accounting, data science. You need to hire people, get them up to speed. This is like a universal need across organizations and across teams within this organization. So that's one area where I see a lot of, and especially because it carries less risk, not exposing it to your customers or your end users, but and you get to kind of understand these technologies as you try them and iterate on them and work with them. So,
so that's a nice segue into our next topic here. That when we look at these workflows, the question to develop or not to develop AI agents, and when does it make sense to make something agentic, and what kind of scenarios do we see some of the maybe more traditional machine learning workflows be a good fit versus something that should have an agentic approach? Even when we think about, right, when Mackenzie says, oh, everything will be connected to AI, how are we going to do that in for which use cases?
Yeah. And maybe for here to start, I just wanted to bring up, if anyone else is familiar with it, last year, Anthropic published on their blog, I think, a really helpful post describing really what agentic is. Because we hear about it a lot, and as with a lot of things AI right now, or like kind of whatever the latest tech like enthusiasm like is, you start to get ahead of yourself in the marketing with like what it actually is. And so what Anthropic described and where they drew the distinction is their AI workflows, and then there's agentic AI. And the big difference is in agentic AI, you're really trusting that LLM to decide the next steps for themselves. It's not set out beforehand. Like they're deciding which tools to use next, like how to iterate, how to reason. Oh yeah, I see someone kind of I think posted it in the chat, which is great. Thank you, Joe. That post to me was really impactful, and I think it's a really good definition to start with. And the other thing I'll emphasize just to start this conversation, Anthropic emphasizes a lot of use cases don't need agentic. It might like it's more expensive to do agentic. It's more complex. And so if you can utilize kind of traditional AI workflows, I don't know, traditional is maybe the wrong word. Traditional being what we used, I don't know, 8 months ago. But if you could use more of these static AI workflows with like a predefined path or predefined tools that they're using, you should do so. You still might get impact off of it. So I don't know. I like to use that to start the conversation here.
No, I think
that's extremely useful. Go ahead, Anthony.
It's a great reference and a great point, Derek. I mean, maybe to Jimmy and Alejandro. I mean, on that note, if we think about the integration of memory, the integration of reasoning tooling, all of a sudden we're building these sort of, in a sense, closed loop decision loops. The stakes are higher, the investments are higher. To Derek's point, right? When we start building those, does that enhance the need for governance and human in the loop? From design, from the onset, like how we think about designing for these types of agentic use cases, and if so, what does that equal, like in our current tooling, in our current solution set? Does that make sense, Jimmy or Alejandro?
Yeah, it does. I'll jump in. Alejandro, I think you had something on the previous point, but I'll jump in this. So I think that's absolutely right. The agents are incredibly capable. If you're using them for, prototyping something small on your laptop, not a lot of risk, depending on what you're giving that agent, like tools you're giving that agent access to. If you give the tool full system access, then you could really just destroy your computer potentially if you do the wrong things. So there's levels of risk, but then when you take that to an organizational level, the LLMs are really strong at understanding a request. There's other tools like the traditional, I say traditional, it's hilarious now, like RAG approaches and those types of things for understanding, say, a code base or a document collection, a knowledge base of some sort, planning some things out and executing those changes. Like there are a lot of capabilities that agents bring to the table, and a lot of different tools that kind of come together there. But you do need to consider security almost first and foremost. So, for instance, like in the context of healthcare, if you need to verify some information, then probably there's some PII that's coming in there, and you need to make sure that you're handling that data correctly, whether that's going into some backend databases, what you're exposing to tools, where those tools are being hosted, like how you're interacting with those. So almost all the classical software engineering and like infrastructure engineering, security ops, all of those things do come into play here. You do have to look at how these things are being communicated, how you're calling these tools, what data is going into these tools, how do you audit those things, and yeah, there's not like one set of tools that's used, or one set of softwares that's used to control these things. I know guardrails, for instance, starts to come up. Like we want to make sure that nothing I mean, basically some regular expressions or some models that are saying none of these types of components are making it out of the LLM's reasoning or into the LLM's reasoning. There's, input guardrails, output guardrails, all kinds of other things. So we're definitely seeing some of those things. At the same time, all of these have computational cost, and so it makes people think. Derek was hinting at, like, yeah, the agents are really, really expensive. So if you're interacting with like a chatbot that's trying to help you with something and it takes 40, 50 seconds per request because it's running all of these things, then you're less likely to use it. And so yeah, I think it is, to hit on what Derek said, it does depend on what you're trying to do, thinking about how you're trying to accomplish it, keeping computational and even just security components in mind as you're building those things. And Alejandro, I think you had something, so I want to stop there.
No, it was actually even higher level than that. It's just to Derek's earlier point about, cautioning people against being overexcited about agents. There's a lot to be excited about. They're really powerful, but it's important to, as Anthropic, suggested in their blog post, you shouldn't be running to an agentic kind of approach. You should build your way up to it. And in fact, if you iterate on like traditional LLM workflows or just RAGs or just general LLM workflows, and you get to a point where it gets extremely complex and you're still not achieving what you want, then that's the point at which you should consider an agentic approach, because it's almost like you're limited by your own imagination and creativity to define what the series of steps you need to solve the problem you have, and you can like codify it in a way that's kind of deterministic. So that's where they really excel, when there's they need that autonomy to decide, basically use case by case. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Alejandro, when you talk about deterministic systems versus probabilistic systems, right? That's the paradigm. And I think someone in the chat has asked about, what are the advantages of including AI ML in traditional RPA, or robotic process automation. So when you look at saying, well, we were really comfortable with deterministic systems where we know all the steps and the input and the output will always be the same, and we can measure it and we can automate processes like that. And these agents start bringing into question probabilistic systems that decide and make, plans and adjust things. Like I started like vibe coding my own little app, right? And so I'm doing this vibe code and I'm watching all the output, and I gave it a really basic prompt. And the agents go and they make decisions that say, hey, I implemented a different color palette for you. I implemented user profiles. I gave you drop downs. I'm like, I didn't ask for that. It just inferred based on the kind of app I was building that I would want those things. And if four of us sat down or five of us sat down and said, well, if we all built the same app, it won't come out the same, right? Depending on the models. So I think that's an interesting framework to look at when we consider kind of like these different use cases, right? So like when to develop AI agentically, when to use traditional workflows, and like where agents really excel on all of these use cases.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll start maybe I'll start with the basics, with the use cases. And I think if you're thinking agentically, it goes back to a classic risk model, really, for when you use agentic versus not, right? Is it deterministic versus not? So maybe to give some examples, what I expect, and I think what we're already seeing, is a lot of agentic use cases within kind of like consumer, like low risk applications. I would not be surprised if your smart TV, if you're able to just tell it the type of show you want to watch and it just picks it and starts playing it, versus you having to search through, say, like the Netflix catalog. Or like kind of these coding assistants are really strong. They have really good UI. Jamie and I have a friend, a former colleague, HPE, who literally built a whole app and startup by himself. He was not a coder before, and he used kind of AI to teach himself to code and to do a lot for him. So these are low risk applications. We have a human in the loop. If it goes wrong, like go back to the Netflix example. Well, like you just pause and you pick a different show. I think where we see real promise, and I believe very strongly, is going to be huge innovations in like the healthcare space and other spaces. But I think you want to be really careful about going the agentic path within healthcare if like the cost of a wrong output or an LM hallucination is much higher, right? And so that's where I always recommend enterprises start first, is like what's the cost? We should experiment where the cost is lower when we get to agents first.
Yeah, there's a question, an interesting question in the chat. It says, do you have an AI agents framework reliable enough for production? The ones I checked out, there's no timeout, no watchdogs, dead loops. When agents pass to another agent, if the second agent hangs, there's no easy way to clean it up and exit nicely in many of the frameworks today. So can anyone speak to like that challenge with working with these types of frameworks?
I don't think I've seen one yet. Alejandro, Jimmy, have you, like, not to say that what's out there is bad, but it's, again, as we said earlier, it's developing so quickly. And well, if we had done this show a year ago, I think we would have been talking about RAG and fine tuning, and here we are talking about agents, right? Like, they've already fallen out of fashion.
Yeah, I've felt similarly. It seems like that agent to agent communication, and like there's effort happening to standardize some of these things with different protocols and those types. But yeah, I've experienced some of the same issues when interacting with agents. They're reliable in some areas, but as soon as something goes down, there's no recovery or timeouts, and sometimes it's 25 steps deep when you just expected it to do something very, very simple, and it can kind of go off the rails a little bit sometimes, or just start getting what I would say like just continuing down a local minima where it tries one thing and then, oh, that didn't work. I'm going to revert back to how it was. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, I'll try that same thing I just tried. And it just kind of ping pongs back and forth. Yeah, trying to solve your problem and then just, maybe eventually times out. I haven't found like a great framework. I mean, there are great things out there, but yeah, something that's fully production ready, robust, reliable. I think we're still somewhat in the early stages, and the people that are building products that seem to be really, really reliable seem to be building their own thing, or building a lot of things on top of that. Maybe you've seen something different, Alejandro, but that has been my experience.
Yeah, same. There's a new framework every other week, so it's hard to keep up. But the tooling is still immature, in my opinion, and it speaks to how early days we are as far as like adoption of agents in production. Certainly, we've been talking about agents and they've been we've been having conversations about them for years now, since 2023. I remember we're already talking about early agents, but the tooling hasn't caught up yet, and it's still very experimental and more of a, you're building POCs, or people are just doing it from scratch themselves. They just use pure Python with some of these higher level like libraries like Langchain or LangGraph with their own kind of logic around it, because people's needs are very like custom, and oftentimes these agentic frameworks like Crew AI or Langflow, which I've used in the past, they just you reach a limit of like, you want more observability, you want to be a full traceback of every step, you want to have more monitoring, or so it's very quickly becomes easier to just build your own kind of agentic framework.
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
There's a question out there on whether HPE has a library of these, of use cases across verticals and solutioning. Many of the customers I know, Audrey, we talk to, are asking for best practices around agents, whether there's even a marketplace that's being stood up that's been quote unquote certified, across other tier customers. I was listening to a webinar the other day, and vendors, starting to build their own AI agent network, almost like a LinkedIn for AI agents. Kind of an interesting concept, but I think many of our customers are keep looking for where there's best practices, where I can build some trust with agents that have been vetted. I'm just wondering, Audrey, if that's something we'll continue to see moving forward, right? Where you have trusted marketplaces that these things are landing in, and where I consume them, or where people continue to build their own, especially in the short term, where everything is still very new.
Yeah, it's probably, from what we're seeing, there's always that exploratory phase, that prototyping phase, and when you can do that in a safe place, and whether that's within traditional workflows or with an agentic workflow, where you can build something out quickly to get ideas or to increase team creativity around how to solve a problem. And then as you go and say, well, I want to put this into production and I need repeatable processes, I need trusted foundation models, I need governance, security, trace back, like all of these components need to be in place. That all of a sudden becomes a problem that you want more control on. So I think it'll just evolve where we need something like that, right? We'll need trusted sources or companies that have done it first, people who have pioneered the way and say, hey, we built this framework, we built this, and we can do it again. We'll get there, and I think we're still in the early phase of that.
Yeah.
And oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, you go first, Jimmy.
Okay. Just to add on to that, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, for instance, some of the ways to standardize agents, there's different components underneath agents, like the tools or like the context providers and the reasoning and like all of these different components that kind of underlie, or the memory, like all these things that kind of underlie the umbrella of agents. And I think we're just now, well, I guess like towards the end of last year and then more recently, starting to standardize on like what those protocols are. So for instance, like the model context protocol out of Anthropic, and this is how we're trying to standardize like tool calls and context providing works with LLMs for like these agent type applications. And then the A2A that came out of Google like just a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago, is trying to standardize agent to agent communication and starting to look at some of those things. So I think we're kind of on the path to what you were talking about, Anthony. But we're still, things are coming out around what are the general structures? What are the APIs that we're building to? And then how do we put structure on top of kind of these vibe coded projects or like our own personal agent frameworks that we're coming out with and everything, these custom built things. But yeah, no, it's moving quickly though. Like the fact that we have all these things, in the next time we do one of these, I'm sure that'll be a very, very
We'll have
concrete direction.
new lingo, right? We'll have,
Exactly.
like learning a whole new vocabulary here in our technology space. Okay, so we're going to transition into an AI Jam show first. So we are going to do a live demo, and so we're really excited for this. I tasked Alejandro with something like this, and we kind of mimicked and played with the idea, well, what if we are this, kind of a generic airline industry, and just giving Alejandro this prompt that says, hey, the CEO wants to see how we can leverage this agentic AI in our customer service. Can you build something by the end of the week? And so this is the challenge. And so I'll turn it over to you, Alejandro.
Yeah, so unfortunately, this is a common experience for a lot of AI developers and data scientists.
A whole week to do this. I thought, you can
Yeah, I mean, end of week if you can manage, right?
It's easier these days, that's for sure. So that's something to be thankful. But I guess it makes the expectations even higher. But yeah, so I wanted to showcase some of the content that we build out. So I wanted to demo to make it a lot more concrete and less abstract these discussions about agents. So I wanted to show like a really minimal agentic system and show you like how is it different from a traditional or like an LLM workflow, as Derek mentioned, from based on Anthropic's definition of an agent. So yeah, so this case, let's take one of the better suited use cases for agents, a customer support agent. So basically, this would be equivalent to a human support, agent that is helping you with issues with your flight. In this case, you were downgraded from first class to coach. This is like a premium customer. And let's say that hypothetically, this airline was having a lot of backlog issues and they have maybe like an employee shortage. So they need to like alleviate this buildup of support tickets with an agentic system. So in order to do that, let's actually walk through this question. So it seems like a simple question, but when you break it down into what does a human, forget the agent, what does a human support representative need to answer this? So in this case, you have the passenger's name and flight information. So that information is stored in private enterprise databases that are sensitive, and you don't want potentially any external APIs to have access to that. You also need to understand the flight policy or the airline's policy with respect to seat downgrades, specifically from first to coach, as well as there's a lot of other factors that play into the final refund amount, such as maybe the geographical region that the flight took place. That could be different regional regulations that are in effect. Or also, I happen to know in this case, and I'll show you in the end, there is a proportional refund based on the ticket price, which is also stored in private databases in their enterprise servers. So you need a couple of these different informations that are in different repositories, and you need to bring them all into the same place and come up with that amount. So just wanted to like set some background for this problem. And one thing I didn't mention too is the distance of the flight actually matters as well. So it's a tiered refund that's proportional to the refund ticket, and it's dependent on the distance of the flight, the region it took place. So the different levels of information you need for this. So if we go to the next. So if we break down what I just described, so you'll need a support agent that's basically a drop-in replacement for the human agent in this case, and they'll need access to, in this simple case, just 2 different data repositories, or we can even abstract them as tools. So these are tools that the agent has at its disposal, and they have full autonomy as to when to call them, in what order to call them, and how many times to call each of them based on the query. We're not prescribing it, we're not telling it, if this, do that. There's no conditional logic. That's the core of what an agentic system is. It's up to them to decide the optimal resolution with some user feedback. So in this case, we can actually take something like a RAG that's traditionally been a really useful like LLM workflow, and kind of abstract it as a tool. So you can think of it as a tool itself that an agent has access to. and it has, for example, in this case, all of the flight policy information vectorized and chunked and pre-processed for easy querying, as well as and this could be public, right? This is publicly available information online. You can find airlines refund policy. It's important for customers to know. But then you have the more sensitive private enterprise data in their own servers, and that has sensitive customer information, potentially payment information that you don't want anybody else to know. So here's one of the flexibilities of having a hybrid type of architecture for these systems, where you could choose to store sensitive private data in your own servers and then have public data that you either pull from a website or have in a public database that anybody can have access to. And then you can decide like the data governance flow of how to design these applications. So hopefully this sets the context for what I'm about to show you. And I'll be showing you this same use case implemented in our private cloud AI environment within an open source framework called Langflow, which you might have heard about. So let me share my screen. And let me go to here. So let's go to the landing page. So this is, if you're not familiar with it, this is our private cloud AI system. So it's actually on-premise server that has the ability to run open source software that's been optimized and basically engineered to work within the environment. And it also gives you the ability to be your own model provider. So you have the flexibility in this type of use case to run things like NVIDIA NIMs that are highly optimized endpoints, or even open source Hugging Face endpoints as well. And you can even import popular open source frameworks, like in this case, Langflow is a very popular LLM and Agentic, flow type of framework, as well as we have our proprietary IP with things like machine learning inference system, which basically gives you the ability, as I mentioned, to deploy your own models on premises and keep it all inside of your own servers, so that maybe that sensitive data that we were accessing earlier doesn't get exposed to an external API. So one other thing about these systems is that you could build with your own models, so you could choose to use, say, OpenAI or Anthropic's endpoints, but it's up to you. Ultimately, you have the full flexibility to decide how to segment what models and what data do they have access to, and it gives you that extra flexibility. So in this case, I'll open up the Langflow environment, and right now it's all running inside of the environment, and I've already built it out, but I'll walk through the steps and I'll zoom in. I know it's kind of a smaller font. But if you're familiar with Langflow, it's an LLM workflow framework where you can basically do drop-ins and have like little components that are pre-configured that let you very quickly prototype these types of workflows and basically pre-configure certain components so that they're already basically have all the information they need. In this case, I filled out all the tokens, endpoint information for the local models and local NVIDIA embeddings, for example, as well as this database querying tool that I have. And let me break down, I know it's a busy UI, but I want to just break down really quickly. This is the same diagram that I showed you earlier, just in a couple of steps. So this part over here, you can think of it as the RAG component, including up to here. So this is the file. It's a policy file for it's called a fictional airline, not get in trouble. And then you have the chunking. So basically, how do you take that PDF, you pre-process it, you split it into little chunks. You have an NVIDIA embedding that's stored locally in the environment that is going to create numerical representations, the vectors that go in the vector store, which is a ChromaDB also running locally. You're going to format that into a prompt that's going to tell the model, which in this case is another NVIDIA. Well, it's a Quen model, but it's running as an NVIDIA endpoint locally as well. So this is another open source model. And it's going to be abstracted as a tool, as I mentioned earlier. So the model is going to decide based on the query, which I'll give it in a second. I'll show you what it is. It's going to decide if it has to use the flight policy information or if it has to use the flight passenger information. So basically, this is another tool that I'm giving it, which is the private sensitive data about the flights, the ticket prices, the region it took place and the distance. So as you can see, it's pretty intuitive way to quickly prototype some of these workflows. In this case, it's Agentic workflow. And let me show you what it actually looks like on the playground. Let me go and create a new chat session just so we can see it from scratch. So here, we're going to run the whole thing end to end. And I'm going to give it the same question that Audrey showed earlier. So it's a multi-part question. It requires the model to understand, the agent to understand which data it needs in what order and how to actually bring it all together to come up with a final answer. And one of the nice things is that in Langflow, you actually can see in this kind of sandbox playground environment, you can actually see all of the steps that the model is taking. And let me zoom out so that it's easier to actually see. So you're going to be able to see the tool calling. So you get a sense of what the model is doing. And I'll show you here. So let me go back here. Yep. So let me break this down. Let me zoom a little bit further because it's kind of busy. So it's going to call the private database, querying it with a structured, for example, JSON in this case, which are some of the primary keys that I have for that database based on the name on the flight ID. Going to pull that information. There's some information about like the cost of the ticket, the flight ID, of course, and maybe the membership status, which could have a relevance for this refund type, as well as the distance of the flight, which, as I mentioned, along with the region, has a bearing on the final refund amount. It also has another tool, which is the RAG tool, which is I just call flight policy, and it's going to look up basically anything pertaining to the downgrade refund. So it's going to take the edited, chunked, retrieved data from the retrieval augmentation generation, and then basically collate both the structured JSON output from the database as well as the actual refund information. And let's walk through the actual output of it. So it's understanding that it was a downgrade from first class to coach. It knows the flight ID. It knows it was in North America. It knows the distance, which in this case has 3 tiers. The first tier has any flight that's less than 1,500 kilometers in the North American region is entitled to a 30% refund. So it goes back, pulls the 300 USD ticket price, and then based on that, it calculates the percentage based on this tiered refund amount, and it gives you the amount 90. So basically, that's kind of like the full step-by-step tool calling, a final kind of response that it comes up with.
Yeah, that's great, Alejandro. So we've just developed, our agentic workflow, and let me go back and present here for you guys to show, just to wrap up our conversation, how are we going to deploy this? So deploying. So we have this wonderful customer service airline agent, and what are some deployment paths we have based on maybe, for inference paths, and how do we get this out into the world?
I think if you think about deployment is really, if we think about who's developing these AI agents, if you're a traditional data scientist, machine learning engineer, you're working in Python, deployment and how you scale these deployments, kind of the security for them, et cetera, really is almost a separate skill set. It's something we're like that job family is learning after all this time. And so I think you see a lot of tools out there, and we've built one internally within HPE called the machine learning inference software. It's trying to automate and abstract from that for you. But I think a few things to consider if you're an enterprise is, first, the cost of machine learning development has really moved from training to inference. Unless you're training your own foundational models, as very few companies are these days, if you're trying to take an existing one, you're no longer doing that training. So your cost is really inference. And you have to consider, I guess, how many GPUs you have. Do you have a guaranteed access to those? How you scale, how you prevent kind of like one application if it scales too much from kind of delaying others, et cetera. So you have to consider latency, cost, and kind of like accuracy across all of these for deployment, it's difficult. But again, there are some open source tools that help with this. HPE has its own software, and I think you're seeing this develop as really kind of like the bottleneck in AI agents. I think it's what we'll continue to see given their cost.
Yeah, and to add in on that, the, there's a lot of different components, I guess, in this full system. And so, for instance, you have in just the scenario that Alejandro described, there's an embedding model that's running, there's an LLM that's running, there's a vector database that has to be like set up and running. There's these other databases that you need connectors to. And so all of those things, like these deployment paths can be pretty varied. Um, I mean, the simple salesy answer is PCI is trying to do all of that, where you have the if you will, like the GPUs available, the storage, the hardware, the network connectivity to be able to build and run these applications, and the software on top of that to give you the development tools as well as the production tools for that. But and really that's kind of been our focus for a little while now, is to build out what you actually need as both a development system and an inference system for some of these types of applications. And so yeah, as far as like the deployment paths, I think that there's a variety of ways. There's essentially, if you're able to work in a cloud environment and that's available, and you have to, go through all those processes. If you need to be on-prem, then that's a different scenario, and you're going to need to think about like the hardware and the software stacks and interconnectivity and all of those kinds of things, as well as scale. And so that's about as salesy as I get. So but that's like at least where I think what we're trying to do is actually solve some of these deployment paths and figure out ways to give people the tools that they need to solve these problems, and also make it marry with.
Right?
Yes, do it at scale, like incorporate open source components, because open source is always going to be a little bit faster, a little bit more risky at points, but or like a little bit more cutting edge or bleeding edge than something a little bit more sustained. But preventing people in this fast-paced environment, preventing you from using something that's cutting edge is almost more of a hindrance in a lot of scenarios. So yeah, so that's why we're trying to build the ability to import your own tools and import your own frameworks, use things like Langflow, like Alejandro was showing, and be able to orchestrate these things all within kind of the system that has the hardware and capabilities to run it all.
So as we wrap up here, I'll ask just one more question that actually came from our Q&A. So viewer asked, is there a particular application you're excited about? A lot of the use cases out there are super creative, even if they don't always make sense from a cost to benefit perspective. So I think that's actually a pretty fun question. We'll just kind of rapid fire. What are you guys excited about? Alejandro.
I just think coding agents are really cool. I think the ability to, because take something like a full stack. You could have a full stack developer at your disposal, navigating through all the labyrinthine integration between the latest front end and back end, and it's just like ultimately as an engineer and a developer, I don't want to get bogged down into like the really minutiae of building out this application. So the fact that you can prototype, draft something really quickly, and then iterate on that, it's a really cool, powerful kind of paradigm shift that I think cannot be understated.
Definitely. How about you, Jimmy?
It's going to be a little bit boring. Like I really enjoy the coding agents as well. I've been very impressed by them. They have a lot of limitations, but once you start combining those with some of the other tool calls, like with MCP protocol and stuff like that, I've been pretty impressed. It is still one of those things where I am the human in the loop in those scenarios, but it makes those things can make me much more efficient until you hit a wall and then you have to go debug some stuff. Beyond like the immediate application of that, it seems like there's a lot more interest or like conversation around world models, which gets outside of LLMs. This is a little bit more pie in the sky, but like basically trying to train models that have physics understanding and stuff like that. Some of those are more for like robotic applications and those types of things. But I'm kind of excited for where research is going on that front.
And Derek?
Yeah. So my answer to this is not going to be the most innovative or the most technical area for LLMs, but but I still think the impacts for how we'll see agents utilized in education will be huge. And I don't just mean education to say, like K-12 school or college, but just for us, even in the enterprise, to upskill ourselves, to be able to, like what these LMs keep explain today. And as we add, think about video, think about audio, think about the different learning styles. I think there's a huge opportunity here to use these tools to upskill ourselves and stay on track of like what the latest trends are in ways that just wasn't available before. We kind of saw a first wave of self-education with YouTube. I think we're seeing kind of the second one coming in with what LLMs could do. So again, I don't think it's going to be the most innovative, like what Jimmy's talking about with these world models, a lot more technically interesting than what I'm referring to. But if I get to see the place where I think it could really transform, it's how individuals are going to use these tools to educate themselves and kind of change job families, upskill, etc.
Yeah, Derek, I think that's just a segue on that a little bit. I think it's a critical path where we are today. Like I think of the world of building teams a lot, right? And what does a hybrid team look like years from now? And how do we measure efficacy of a hybrid team? And whether it's a co-pilot application, a domain expert, and a data scientist now in a hybrid environment trying to solve for a workflow, and how do you measure and learn from one another? There's a new set of relationships that are taking place. I think that the application of building teams and measuring efficacy is pretty humbling. We're sort of at the beginning of that, and I feel like a responsible party almost as we build foundations to how we do that for the next generation of folks that are entering this market as well. So that's what I get excited about. It's just riffing a little bit off of your comment as well, Derek.
Well, thank you all for the conversation today. I think that this is really insightful, and I hope our audience enjoyed it as much as I did. There was another question in the chat around, how do you learn more, and how do you train your workforce as well to use these skills? So I just want to help people know how to do that. So we do have HPE Discover Las Vegas is coming up. It's in the middle of June. If you are attending, I highly recommend this AI developer workshop. It's something you can add on to your pass, and you can learn and attend in this 4-hour session while you're at the conference. So this is a great learning and enablement opportunity to be a part of. We also, go ahead, Anthony. Sorry.
Get to meet Alejandro. Don't forget.
Yes. Yeah, live in person. So if that's not exciting enough. Yeah, please come and visit us and see us all live. We also have our educational services path have different opportunities for you to learn about AI topics and also get hands-on training with our private cloud AI and software tooling technologies and stacks. We even have partnerships through NVIDIA's Gen AI Deep Learning Institute that we can connect you with as well. So if you have education learning credits through HPE, there are opportunities for you to learn and have your workforce learn more about these AI topics as well. And that's it for me. Over to you, Didier, to close.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we have more coming up for learning as we're gonna continue this AI Jam. Great job, Alejandro, and great job the entire panel today. We have a number of webinars that we run on a monthly basis. So the AI Jam is one of them. The next session is going to be May 14th. Audrey will be back with lessons on AI retail projects. So please think about that. We don't have the registration link yet, but we'll have that soon. Otherwise, we have 2 additional series that we run on a monthly basis. One is Munch and Learn, and there's a session on May 21st on Sustainability Insight Center. The links are going to be provided by my colleague Denis in the chat. And we also have 2 meetups coming up in April and May. The next one in April might be of interest for this audience because this is going to be a technical demo on private cloud AI, which Alejandro did as well today. So another one, I guess. walkthrough. And at the end of May, we're going to talk about the COM API and the DevOps ecosystem around COM. So that's a different topic, but this is all about programming and getting more agile with your infrastructure. So yeah, Denis has put the links in the chat, so you guys can register. The last word is about our workshops on demand, and this is just a way you can learn more with hands-on experience. And you can move to the next slide, Audrey, no problem. And these are the links to the developer community. You can join any of our talks. They're all open to customer partners and internal people, of course. And with that, I think we're done.
That's it. Thank you all to our guests and for our listeners out there as well. If you have suggestions for future topics or things you want to hear about specifically, you can always reach Anthony and myself at that QR code up at the top. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.